10 years ago, I organised a pilgrimage for young people with disabilities to go to World Youth Day in Madrid. And prior to it, we went to the Holy Land and we had some days around the Sea of Galilee. There was a young guy from this parish who came along as part of our group. And he loves fishing, still loves fishing even today. And I learned a lot from him about fishing, because he insisted that wherever we went, if there was water, we had to go fishing at the different places we went to. So we went to the Sea of Galilee and we had Mass on a boat, but then he insisted on wanting to fish off the boat in the Sea of Galilee and actually caught fish. It was quite a fun experience. But one of the interesting things that I learned from him is that to be a good fisherman, you need some patience. But also you need to learn the environment. You need to talk to other people who fished in that location before. And he would say, okay, what sort of tackle are we going to use? What are we going to put on the end of our rods? Are we going to use rods? Are we going to use nets? He was very interested in all these sort of things. And if you've been a fisherman, you'll learn that you need to actually study the places that you're going to fish. And it's actually quite an interesting sport, or an interesting industry, you could say. And I think to a certain extent, Jesus selects fishermen to be amongst his apostles because of the skills that they bring from being fishermen. They know they need to prepare. They know they need specific equipment. They need to know the environment before they even start to go fishing. And all of us are called to be fishers of men as well. We're called to go out and to try to catch fish, to bring them into the church, to bring them into faith. But in doing so, we need to be like the fishermen who go and fish in lots of different places. We need to learn. We need to study. We need to know the environment that we're fishing in so that we're actually successful in what we do. So if we want to become missionaries, and hopefully that's part of what we want to be as Christians, first of all, we need to study the environment, know what's out there. Another element of fishing, especially from an ancient Greek and an ancient Roman perspective, was that a fisherman was someone who makes a judgment. You probably remember, at least I remember, maybe the young kids in the church probably don't remember the commercials of John West. Maybe some of the older parishioners might remember. The fish that John West, the fish that made John West the best was the ones that they were able to judge that weren't worthy. There was a particular slogan which is not coming to mind now. Some of you might remember it. But they were part of what it meant to be a fisherman, and part of it back in ancient times, but in even more recent times, was to make a judgment. The fisherman had to be able to say, is this fish worthy to be sold? Or do you throw it back? I remember even as a young kid, when I first went fishing, I caught some little fish. And I remember my dad saying, that's too small, throw it back. So there's a judgment that we have to make. And part of what the role of the missionary, part of what the apostles' role is to do, is to stir up the deep, to stir up where those fish are at the bottom of a lake when they were using net fishing, and to bring up the fish so that they can be judged, whether they're judged worthy. And that's part of the role of the missionary, is to bring people up, to stir up the deep, the dark places, so the people are brought into the light, and then hopefully they're found worthy to then be taken to market. As Christians, we're called to be fishermen. We're called to set our nets and our fishing rods into the dark places of even of our community, the dark places of our own lives. And this is sort of what John the Baptist was talking about, that we need to repent to be able to hear the good news. All of us have darkness in our lives, and there is many places of darkness in the world. And we're called to go to those places, to bring people from the dark and to bring them into the light. Sometimes they need a bit of a tugging. If they get caught in the net, you need to drag them out from those dark places. I think the analogy of fishing works well. Jesus called fishermen, and they brought specific skills and specific abilities. They knew to prepare. They needed to study the environment they were going into. And then they knew they needed to work hard to be able to stir up the fish in the dark to bring them into the light so that God can make the judgment. We aren't called to be people of darkness. We're people of the light. One of the beauties of the Easter mysteries is that we go on the Easter Vigil from the darkness of the Easter Vigil to experiencing the light of Easter. And at every Mass, we light candles as a reminder to us, not that we just like to have some candles on the altar, but to remind us that we are people of the light. We aren't people of darkness. So let us be like the apostles who were called by Jesus Christ to go out and to fish for men. Let's put out into the deep, into the dark places. Let's study those places, know how to attract those who are in the dark places, to bring them into the light, so that they can be judged worthy of a place in God's kingdom. Let's go and let's put out into the deep.